What is your disability and how do you manage? I'm legally blind. It's important to point out that there's a difference between legally blind and completely blind. With correction, glasses/contact lenses. My vision is 2200, 2400 without. Part of the problem is nystagmus, which makes my eyes move constantly, and there's nothing that can be done about it currently. I don't have too much trouble with it, as it has been this way since birth, so I've had 34 years to figure it out. Can't read things from just about any distance beyond arm's reach, but phones have helped with that in recent years, as I can just take a picture and then zoom in. There are little things, like I get a lot of anxiety meeting people in a crowded place, like a bar, for example, because I won't be able to recognize them from a distance and would have to basically awkwardly walk by every table looking to see if they're who I'm looking for. I just try to arrive early and be the first one there so they have to find me instead. Similarly, finding my way around somewhere new, like when I started university, is extra daunting. I can't drive, which is quite a pain in the ass. Recently I found it even made it harder to find a job in my computer-based field, as for some reason almost every job listing throws must have a driver's license at the end. It has also been frustrating throughout various life stages, like dating as a teen once everyone else got their licenses. You want to go to a movie? Great, we'll take the bus. I live in a smaller city where taking public transit is not the norm, and kind of considered just for poor people who can't afford a car. I obviously disagree. Also, my wife is 38 weeks pregnant, so I'm anxious about not being able to drive her to the hospital in an emergency. Thankfully my wife and I recently moved into a neighborhood with every conceivable amenity, except a hospital, within a 20-minute walk, so I can have a lot of independence in running errands. The biggest way I manage, and a lesson it took me a little too long to learn, is that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say I can't read that menu, what are my options? I can't see very well, can you direct me to the main office? I have to pick up something at the store that's too big to carry home, do you mind giving me a ride? Edit to add, it's also important to remember that disability, hardship isn't a competition. My grandfather was completely blind, so I always knew I could be in a tougher situation, yet he never looked for pity and made his living as a car mechanic. On the flip side, if a friend with 20/30 vision says I'm so blind without my glasses, it's no fun to play the you think you have it bad game. The whole asking for help thing is a strange one. Not long ago I injured my leg and went through a sequence of being fully immobile, being able to move around short distances on crutches, but with pain, to steadily improved mobility. I'm basically fine now. I have a good and supportive circle of friends who offered all the help I might possibly want. What I discovered is as I got better I really strongly, on an emotional level, did not want to accept help from people. I wanted the sense of independence of doing things for myself, even if I was slow, clumsy and feeling pain as a result of it. On a rational level it makes no sense. My friends would not have thought any worse of it if I had just asked for help, and yet on an emotional level I just didn't want to ask for it. Once, when I was at the point of being able to move on crutches without appreciable pain, I got on the bus and when a young guy immediately got off a seat for me, I caught myself actually feeling resentment, that like, I'm okay, I can just stand. It's funny because, earlier in my recovery, when I got on a bus and genuinely was in pain and the same thing happened, I was extremely grateful for the seat. On a rational level it makes absolutely no sense, and yet that was the emotional reaction I had at the time. I totally understand that my experience was something of a disability tourist, and that it was a passing phase of my recovery from an injury. But I found that actually living through it changed my view on the topic of the psychological aspects of how living with a disability affects people, in a way that previously I couldn't easily relate to. I have osteogenesis imperfecta type 3/4, Doctors can't agree on which type. If you don't know what that is, you can Google it, but the overly simple explanation is my bones are like glass. Take gives every 6 months to help my bones keep their strength. Have had 14 rotating surgeries in almost all my main limbs. I try and stay away from places I know can be a threat. Any ball games or difficult manual labor. Keep my phone or someone with the phone with me 24/7 in case an ambulance is needed. I have a fracture kit on hand in case something happens. My house isn't completely accessible, so need help in a few areas, but I stay on one floor, have a stair lift, bath lift, etc. I have a wheelchair for inside my house, which is a manual one, and a power one I use for outside and around town. I see a psychologist who deals with disabled youth to keep my mental health in check every 2 weeks. ADHD medication, and at this point most of my executive function is outsourced to my wife. She's the kind of organized person who keeps a diary with all the family appointments in it anyway. So she includes mine and lets me know about my schedule. Once a year, one watch in Oz, she does the changing of the diaries. It's like a superpower. She writes appointments in her diary every time, and then she checks it and just knows. My job is to tell her immediately if I make an appointment on my own, and to check with her when would be good if that's an option. I roll my eyes so hard at dudes who make jokes about me being whipped when I get invited to something social, and I'm like, let me just check with my wife if I'm free. I am not risking this sweet setup where my life is organized for me by getting in the way of my wife's system. If I mess up by double booking myself by agreeing to go paintballing with friends on the same day of, I don't know, a doctor's appointment, she might make me keep track of my own schedule, and I'll be sent back to the hell of being incredibly bad at that I lived in before. No thanks. My wife is kind enough to track my schedule for me, and I show my gratitude by making sure that's easy enough for her to do. Recently got diagnosed at age 36. I'm chaos incarnate, my therapist says. I have a high IQ and an even higher processing information IQ, but for the life of me I'm freaking forgetful as hell. I write everything down in my Google shared agenda with my fiancé, with added things I can only see, like clipping my damn fingernails or doing my beard. Otherwise I won't do it unless I get it pointed out. I'm way too biased, thinking and doing 6 things at a time. No medication yet, as that's what my therapist will talk about next appointment. I'm actually used to being chaos, but my fiancé would love for me to be less, I'm sure. As a fellow ADHD/ADD, which was discovered at 29, now I'm 40. I totally concur the above. If I don't write things down, I tend to forget them. It didn't get easier when I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, which did reappear for the 3rd time in 7 years. Got a chemotherapy for this one. So glad that your wife is willing to help you. She's definitely a keeper. Getting help is not always easy, so when you realize you need it, and it is given to you, all the better. My short-term memory is completely shot to hell, especially when having appointments, so yes, writing the dates down on a calendar really helps. Was born with moderate hearing loss in my ears, and at age 9, which started to happen months after a car accident, I lost my hearing and started to become severe. So for reference, I used to be able to put headphones on and still be able to hear the song at basically high volume. When I lost my hearing, it got increasingly difficult to even hear the lyrics. At age 12 and 17 got my cochlear implants, and it was crazy the little sounds I had missed that I couldn't really hear with my hearing aids. My favorite, being Canadian, is the sound of hockey sticks on TV. Edit. I manage mostly lip-reading people. I know some sign, but I don't really use it. I can hear words and sentences, but my brain still has difficulty processing information, so I'll miss what is being said unless I focus on the person speaking. So sometimes I have someone rephrase a sentence just because I could not understand a word. I also have a cochlear implant, as I am deaf in my left ear, and also have profound hearing loss, but am not deaf in my right ear. My hearing loss is progressive, as I was born with normal levels of hearing, and had that up until I was about 1 or 2. I then only had a partial hearing loss in my right ear, until I suddenly went deaf in my left ear at about 7 years old. My hearing loss is believed to have been caused by a condition known as Pandred syndrome. I'm in this boat too. I was born with glaucoma and it only gets worse. I have never been able to see well enough to drive a car, but I have also never been able to get SSI or disability. I somehow lucked into a teaching job that pays very well, but I can barely manage to work more than 20 hours a week without being totally exhausted. It just hit me fairly recently that one of the reasons I am tired all the time is because I am multitasking 24/7 on top of whatever else I am supposed to do, memorizing where I am going, listening for anyone and everyone, constantly analyzing everything based what I hear, feel, and smell. Me too. The constant policing and monitoring of my behavior is pretty exhausting, but has made me a very self-aware person. I'm always the first to say sorry, and my friends say that even though I can definitely get difficult, the fact that I'll apologize the next day while many people never do is why they love me. Smile. Lots of good and bad with bipolar 2, but I guess that makes sense given the nature of the disease. Well, Buterin and Lamictal have been life-changing and I don't see myself going off of them anytime soon. Finally feel like myself after 10 years of feeling trapped in my own brain. I am one of the few women praying for menopause. Same. In my case, I have adenomyosis. I was getting 4 iron infusions twice a week. For so long my veins were starting to scar over, and my hematologist, which I saw for chronic severe anemia, wanted to have a port surgically placed. Ablation made things worse. My body rejected 3 ids, well, less rejected than a big clot forced, pushed them out. Insurance won't cover a hysterectomy because I'm too young. I'm 36, and have no kids. I can't have kids. Only thing that works for me is continuous dose, as in, no week off, hormonal birth control to completely suppress my periods. Given my age and migraine with aura and weight, working on it, but it's not a quick process. It puts me at a much higher risk for blood clots, but it's either that or a complete inability to function for 10-14 days a month and a fucking surgical port in my chest for iron infusions. Best part, I've had adenomyosis for over 20 years, when I started menstruating, because all the symptoms go back to the very beginning, but wasn't diagnosed until 31 because no one, until my living angel current kin, believed me until I collapsed and needed an emergency blood transfusion. Some women just have heavy periods and young women with no kids don't get adenomyosis. Edit typos. The cause is currently undiagnosed, but I have premature arthritis. Like I'm not even 30 yet and already have an insane amount of degradation in my spine, hands, and feet. I have an array of lab work to get done just this week actually. In order to find the cause, I dissociate a lot. It numbs the pain for a little bit. Separating myself from my body is the closest thing I have to feeling healthy. Heat makes it feel slightly more bearable, so I move where it's hot all the time and use heating pads. However, I haven't found a solution that leaves me without pain even for a day. I guess it could be considered a disability. I got diagnosed with epilepsy in April 2020. I had been having seizures very often, daily most of the time for 2 years before that. Most times they were several in a day, sometimes upwards of 10 in just a morning. Trying to work through that in an office setting was rough. I have a history of struggling with mental health issues, so I thought they were some sort of panic attack, but I knew they were different. Got misdiagnosed with PTSD for a bit, but then in March 2020 I had a grand mal tonic-clonic seizure that put me in the hospital for a week while they did all sorts of tests and scans. They found a small mass in my left temporal lobe as well as some scarring on my brain and put me on heavy steroids to try and just clear it up, and told me to come back for another CAT scan in 3 months, which didn't do anything for what I was going through daily. So we went to get a second opinion a month later, where I was diagnosed with left temporal lobe epilepsy with mesial sclerosis. It's been an adjustment for sure. I haven't driven a car since then, as I have to be seizure-free for 6 months to get behind the wheel, and I never get close to that. A lot of people are able to become seizure-free from meds, but unfortunately mine is medication resistant. The meds definitely help, I don't have them nearly as often, but I still have them. I've had to rely on people a lot more, which is something that I really struggled with. I have an amazing girlfriend who also happens to be a nurse, and I wouldn't have made it this far without her. Next steps: I'm trying to get brain surgery. They can see the mess in imaging, but it's not precise enough to be able to operate from imaging alone. I have to go into the hospital and stay for 5-6 days hooked up to an EEG monitor. The goal is to take me off my meds and sleep deprive so that we can catch a seizure on the EEG in order to further pinpoint the location of the mass. Unfortunately, I have done 2 stays like this so far and not had a seizure while there, which is very discouraging. I just want to drive again and have my freedom back. I don't want to have to depend on people as much. We moved for the sole purpose of being close to my work so I can bike to it, which is nice because I was Ubering a bit after we started to go back to the office a few months ago. It's definitely something that affects my daily life, but I'm learning to live with it. However, I am still hoping to have a successful EEG soon. I apologize for the wall of text. Yesterday, I had twice as many seizures in a single day than I have had since starting meds, so this is all very much on my mind. Progressive motor neuron disorder. I've been dealing with it for 26 years now. I'm lucky that mine has progressed slowly. I use a wheelchair at this point. Unluckily, my insurance only covers shitty heavy cumbersome worthless chairs, so I have to pay out of pocket. With the chair I have now, I can work 40+ hours a week and go out with friends a couple times a week. Weekends are usually spent recuperating from all the energy I spent getting around all week. I have chronic gastritis, mystery stomach problems. It's been about 8.5 years of this. I can't drink alcohol at all anymore. I cannot eat anything spicy or acidic. I am in constant pain, varying between a burning feeling in my stomach to just constant nausea/pressure/swelling feelings. It's taken a huge mental toll on me since I have considered myself a little bit of a foodie and I cannot enjoy food like I used to. Doctors cannot figure it out and I've had so many tests and treatments and almost zero relief. Had to scroll so far down for GI. No one talks about it enough. I literally lost jobs and gained depression from mine. I can't work in an office. This whole COVID WFH thing has been such a blessing for me. It is at times so painful I can't leave the house, and doctors never figured it out. I had to stop accepting colonoscopies. What is it with GIs and their damn colonoscopies? They never find anything. I'm not going through that again. I got a dicyclomine RX, and use that along with anti-gas meds, Imodium, sertraline. It helps. And food restrictions from blood tests and allergy tests. I finally admitted to myself I have a disability when it occurred to me I can't live a normal life and do the things I used to love, like travel. I'm just me at home now. A note to store owners on this disability and accessibility: make your bathrooms public. For goddamn sake. Some of us can't lead a normal life because you won't. I literally have apps on my phone to find the nearest public restroom because it's that debilitating. Peace. Yes, I should have sued for losing the jobs. I know. Could be a millionaire right now, while stuck at home, at least. I wouldn't say a disability compared to many others, but I was born with a partial left limb, missing below the elbow. I was born in the 80s and the doctor suggested to my parents I wear a paddle to adjust. My mom said no, she'll be fine on her own. I can pretty much do anything I have tried except for driving a manual trans or holding a pool stick properly. I'm sure there's more, but those are the ones that come to mind. Oh, and a manual can opener. Gone through more of those than I care to admit due to the way I hold them. Yes, I know there's electric ones, but I refuse to give up the good fight. As I got older, I wish I got a prosthetic for cosmetic reasons because the staring would get to me. It took years, but I somehow managed not to pay so much attention to it. A good support system has always helped me. No one treats me any different and they allow me to vent without judgment on the days that it does get to me. Edit. For the record, I wish I was born with 2 hands. ADHD/OCD. The ADHD is very debilitating and pretty much rules my entire life. I have executive dysfunction to the point where I won't get out of bed or make lunch because I can't convince myself to do it. I have issues with short-term memory. I find it hard to talk to people and listen because I can't stop my own internal dialogue drowning the person out. I get overwhelmed and emotional very easily. I experience sensory issues and I will often hyperfocus on useless or stupid things and lose complete track of time. I take Adderall, which definitely helps me focus, remember things, and be more in control of my executive dysfunction, but there's really no helping some of the other things. As for OCD, it's pretty much uncontrolled.